This call is being recorded.
This call is being recorded. Okay.
By Satan.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we continue our Hellraiser series with the 1988 film Hellbound, Hellraiser II, produced by Clive Barker, this time directed by Tony Randel. Not the Tony Randel of The Odd Couple, but the other Tony Randel, the director, if I recall, of the movie version of Fist of the North Star. So bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of this winter's Young Captain Nemo from Fiveland Friends Macmillan Books. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, lead singer and bassist at the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, the one and only writer of the long-running underground comic series Halloween Man and winner of the 2018 Best of Austin Award from the Austin Chronicle, Mr. Drew Edwards.
Yeah, and I have such sight to show you.
I love that line. It's a fabulous line. Also in Austin, president of Girls Rock Austin and lead singer and upright bassist of the internationally acclaimed all-female rock and roll band Danger Cakes, whose newest release, Gloomy Girl, is available. Jamie Barr, say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, hello. Okay, we are back for Hellbound, Hellraiser II, which, by the way, I saw on the Roku for free. It was the only way I could find it. It was on the Roku on Pluto TV. So it had very strange interruptions.
It's on Amazon.
Well,
On
I mean,
Shudder.
that's on Shudder, and I don't have Shudder right now.
Right.
So there we go.
Shame.
Yeah. Well, I've been experimenting with different OTT services, and I don't have Shudder at the moment because DC Universe is getting in there. All right. Hellbound Hellraiser II. This is a 1988 British-American body horror film. That's what Wikipedia calls it. I think that's hilarious. Directed by Tony Randel, starring Claire Higgins, Ashley Lawrence, Kenneth Cranham, and Doug Bradley as Pinhead. The film is the second entry in the Hellraiser saga. It draws heavily upon and was made by much of the same cast and crew as its precursor, the amazing Hellraiser. Clive Barker, who wrote and directed the previous film, wrote this story and is the sequel's executive producer. So let's do a different order for opening thoughts than we did last week. Let's do Tony, Jamie, Drew, and then I'll go. Tony, I don't know how often you've seen Hellbound Hellraiser 2, but what are your opening thoughts?
It's been a while, although before I get into it, I now want an odd couple with Tony Randel and Pinhead.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing.
Not the director Tony Randel, but actually the odd couple Tony Randel, where it's him and Pinhead, and
That's a
Pinhead's
wonderful
always
idea.
ripping through things and there's blood everywhere.
I get it because Pinhead's probably so persnickety that he'd be like, "What is that pasta that you put on the wall?"
Well, if it's Tony Randel, his character is that. So I think
you're
it's
right.
more.
That's true.
Yeah. So it would be two sort of proper
He'd be
people.
upset that he was leaving his hooks everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
I know.
Then Ed would have to be the Felix character. Anyway, so I have to admit, Hellraiser 2 has been my favorite for a while, but this rewatch, I don't know if it's just whatever my headspace is or whatever is going on, but it is a lot more disjointed and bizarre than I remember it. By leaps and bounds. I still think it's cool, and it has some really great imagery, and all of the hell stuff is very, very, very classic Clive Barker.
Yeah.
If you've read any of his novels, but I don't know if it holds up quite in the way that I remembered it.
Yeah.
But it introduces so many cool, just weird, awesome things, and all of the villainy is there. I like it, but I don't know if I liked it this time as much as I remembered liking it, which kind of made me sad, but I still enjoy it by a lot.
Very cool. Okay. Jamie, you just watched Hellraiser last week. Now it's Hellbound Hellraiser 2. What are your thoughts?
I feel like I think the special effects are great, but the plot is so disjointed, and I don't know, the use of like cuts from the first movie,
Mm,
that drives me nuts. I always feel like it's like it reminds me that the people who making the movie think that their audience are basically morons. Like they're like, you probably haven't seen the first one, or maybe you just forgot. But this
right.
is what happened. Don't you remember this exact thing? And like to the point where it feels like they're showing it like multiple times.
Yes.
It just, I don't know, it just got on my nerves. But also like Kirsty is like somebody who I feel like she sometimes just doesn't, I don't know, her reactions to things I feel like are almost amusing to me. I don't know
Sure.
why. Like it's just so over the top, which if you were actually going through this, your reactions would be over the top. It's insane. But I don't know, some of the stuff is just I don't know. I don't want to say garbage, but I feel like it's just terrible in spots. But other places, like it does make up for it in certain scenes. But I
Sure.
don't know if it makes up enough.
It's
That
definitely very ham-fisted. All the flashback stuff. I didn't remember
Yeah,
it being nearly as egregious. And
the
then just
you don't
oh,
need them. Well, I mean, we don't need them because we just watched the last. And so
but I
I'm
hadn't seen this movie in years, and I still remember that from the last time I saw that. And that was I've only
mm,
seen it one other time, and it just I don't
yeah,
know. It just makes it so that's like unenjoyable to me. I feel like I'm just watching recaps. And it also makes me feel like it's like a made for TV movie. Like
mm,
even though it's totally like not of content. It could be now. Like if it's funny, it could be like the made
sure.
for TV movie of this decade as opposed to, when it was made. But like I don't know.
No, that's
This
an
wasn't
excellent point. Yeah, no, it is, and it also is the possibility that those are cost-cutting measures, because if you can fill like 3 4 minutes of screen time, then it's 3 4 minutes that you don't have to shoot. Because this movie full running time 93 minutes. So, those extra few minutes of flashbacks actually pad out the film. I don't know if that's a reason or if they just decided to be really good. I don't know.
That
Drew,
was
what do you,
actually kind of
yeah.
more commonplace in the 80s, though. Like a lot of the Friday the 13th did
Mm,
this. And, a lot of the Nightmare on Elm Streets did that. And I'm not saying that it's not kind of goofy. It is, especially if you did just watch the original, which we did.
yeah.
And I guess I'll dovetail into my thoughts about this. I
Yes.
still really like this one. I think I'm probably a little bit more forgiving of it than Jamie and Tony, because I think the stuff that works about it really works for me, which I often describe this movie as a really fucked up Jim Henson movie, because I
mhm.
think this is sort of like the dark side of Labyrinth, but like instead of David Bowie with big hair and in a cod piece, we have Pinhead and the Cenobites, and a very frankly unique conception of hell.
Yes.
Like we already talked about how the demons of the Hellraiser universe are not like any other conception of demons. This sort of Escher, very ordered version of hell it's not the inferno that we're used to, and the idea of Leviathan is this geometric shape,
Yeah.
where it could have just very easily been a typical demon figure like the one we saw in maybe Legend, or
Yeah.
a lot of other films of this time period. Again, so unique. So it gives it a big bump up. I don't think like Tony, I used to say that this is my favorite Hellraiser movie. I still think it's the best sequel by like a considerable margin.
Mm,
Not that that's saying a lot, but I having just watched the original, I think the original Hellraiser now has to take the top spot again. But I think this is a fun sequel. I still enjoy it.
I'm with you.
I think there's a lot of fun stuff to discuss here, and that's what's kind of going on to me is that this is a movie where it takes the film that was Hellraiser and starts to sort of blow out the mythology and build on it, so that you get like 8 times as much mythology in this one than you did in the first. And also to everybody's point, if you take the first Hellraiser and you sum it up on the back of an envelope, you can probably write out the various beat points of that movie, and it all makes sense, and it's a pretty simple story. This is fairly complicated. There's a hell of a lot of stuff going on. It's kind of funny. This is a short movie with short scenes that jumps around a lot, and there's way more going on than in the first movie, which is one of those things that some people think is a mark of bad films, and I do find it kind of enjoyable. That there's what side do I come down on? I don't know how much I would watch this movie, but I think its ideas are fascinating. I think it's really cool. I think it trades some of the sexual obsession of the first movie for more gore effects and stuff like that. And I'm not sure that's a trade that I necessarily prefer, because I kind of liked the sexual obsessiveness of the first movie. This one, eases up on that a little bit, and instead, although it's got some interesting stuff going on, but it's got a lot of crazy violence. And so let's get in it. Oh, okay. Well, one more thing that I wanted to mention, I wanted to compare this also to the Phantasm series, because when you think about it, that movie
yeah.
also started out pretty simple, right, and then got really strange as it went on. This
Well,
one at
let's be
least
fair.
keeps.
Phantasm started out strange.
Well, it did start out, but this movie started out strange too. This thing had Pinhead from the beginning, so it's uh what doesn't happen and what did happen in Phantasm started to go towards humor. And to the extent that there's any humor in the Hellraiser movies, it is deeply, deeply sardonic humor. It doesn't have the sort of goofiness of the Phantasm sequels. And now I haven't seen any of the further Hellraiser sequels, so maybe they eventually head for goofy humor. I don't know. To begin with, though, we get the origin of Pinhead. So what basically is going on in this movie is Kirsty, the daughter of Andrew Robinson from the first movie. Kirsty finds herself in a hospital because everybody thinks that she's crazy, and the psychiatrist running the hospital is actually a demon obsessed guy who collects the all important puzzle boxes that are so important to the cosmology of these movies, and he's trying to figure out a way into the other world. And ultimately, it's going to be about his attempts to use what he can get from Kirsty to get into the other world, and bad guy Julia from the last movie's attempts to get back into our world, and Kirsty's attempts to defeat both of them. But in the middle of all that are these guys, the Cenobites, who have the weirdest, strangest character arc I've ever seen for demonic murderers, which is that they have an arc towards redemption in this movie. Anyway, we start with Pinhead. The very first thing that happens in the second Hellraiser movie is they go, hey, remember that guy Pinhead? Let's show you how he began. Does anybody else, so that I don't have to just keep talking, does anybody else want to take a shot at explaining the origins of Pinhead? Drew, I know you're a fan, so you could go for it.
All right, I'll go. So it's somewhere in the early 20th century. We have a guy, presumably a World War I soldier, in what appears to be somewhere in the Middle East. He's got a puzzle box laid out, the puzzle box laid out in front of him. He's working on it, and of course, he opens it up. Chains pop into his head.
Gosh.
We see him drug into hell, a geometric design carved into his head,
Yep.
and then nails rammed ritualistically into his head. And basically what we see is how this gentleman has now become Pinhead,
Yeah.
whom we know and love if you are a Hellraiser fan.
And in the universe of Hellraiser, what gets you turned into one of these guys is if you are one of those people who is a searcher for the ultimate in sensory experience. You know, you're looking for pain and pleasure. You kind of graduate into sort of some kind of ultimate realm for that, and you graduate essentially by being able to unlock a puzzle box, because later Pinhead, when a girl unlocks it who isn't one of these sense freaks, he goes, no, we don't just come after somebody because they're smart enough to solve the puzzle. You got to like have your heart in it. You got to want to be
it's not
one of
hands.
us.
It's not hands who call us. It's desire, which is one
Right.
of my favorite lines in the whole series. And there's a lot of stuff in the Hellbound heart that the movies never really get into so much. Like the Cenobites are part of a theological order called the Order of the Gash, and they serve this thing Leviathan, which we do actually see in this movie. And so they're not just like generic demons. They're demons who are part of a particular religious caste, which has this sort of sadomasochistic pain worship, and which we all find so fascinating for reasons.
There's sense freaks. That's the word that TV tropes uses for it. People who are all into like figuring out how to reach the edge of your senses, pain, pleasure, whatever it is. And yes, and so you have to be a candidate for that, for Pinhead to want to come after you, at least in this movie.
I've always personally wondered why the gentleman whom we learn in later sequels is named Elliot Spencer, the guy that becomes Pinhead. Why him and then the Doctor in this movie, they get to become Cenobites. But then you have people like Frank who just kind of get punished in hell, or Julia who is in hell.
Great question.
But she's not a Cenobite. I want to know who rates what, because I've always found that particular question a bit nagging.
Well, if I were writing a comic book based on this, you would kind of you'd have the opportunity for characters like that to spend time as a Cenobite after doing other stuff. In other words, I could imagine like reaching into hell, and after you lose a Cenobite and going, Frank Cotton was a fuck up. He would probably be interesting. So let's see what we can do with him and bring him back.
My guess has always been part of that, what you're talking about, where it's the intent.
Yeah.
Or the I don't know. I mean, it's kind of weird to say this in the context, but purity of spirit.
Yes.
Like the Doctor is purely malevolent in his pursuit.
Yeah.
But also aided by Julia, who's gonna, help him become this thing. But then I think,
oh, sorry.
Pinhead, also I get the feeling that there are certain people who have Leviathan deems like, you've got what it takes.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where it comes from in my read of it.
See, I was wondering if it was like, what's the bureaucracy here? Is this like, when you first get pulled in, are you like, entry level?
Right.
And then you rise up the ranks, you get to be like assistant manager, supervisor, then manager of this, like, as Cenobites. Like, why is Pinhead the lead Cenobite? Yeah, that's something I kind of wish they, at the end when they, reveal everyone as their human selves, I was kind of like disappointed to not really have any sort of backstory at all on them. It's like, I wish I knew, especially the kid, like the boy who apparently was
the Chatterer.
Yeah.
Right?
And I thought that was strange.
Or what was he I'm trying to remember. Was he the Butterball or was he the Chatterer? I can't remember.
The little boy is the Chatterer.
Yeah.
He's actually the kid from The Good Son.
Macaulay Culkin.
I don't know.
It's a really, really good idea. Well, I mean, and also something strange happens here. And remember, of course, that since Leviathan is all knowing, one presumes, then he can probably read everybody's mind, and so about the same time that Pinhead is quitting, Leviathan is probably deciding, well, you're fired, because he makes the Doctor into a Cenobite. And the first thing that the Doctor does is come, and I think the Cenobite is called the Doctor. And the first thing that he's supposed to do is go and fight the Cenobites who have essentially decided to quit, as far as we can work out. It's very strange, but I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves.
I didn't think that they quit though. I'm sorry. I
No,
didn't
please.
think that they quit. Drew and I were discussing this, and he was saying because they were suddenly like remembered their true form and they remembered their humanity, it wounded them. Where they weren't just beings and like the people of the whatever they were called, something of the gash,
The Order of the Gash.
whatever vagina, on double entendre they're going to use.
Right.
Like what it's just kind of
You're absolutely right. No, you're correct. Yeah.
That's not even a double entendre. That's a single entendre.
Yeah, you're right. It's true.
Thank you, Clive Barker.
Speaking of the one place where the weird body crazy sex obsession does come back is the delightful.
I disagree with you that there's no sex obsession in this, but we'll I don't want to cut you off too much.
You may be exactly right. So let's explore that. But I want to talk a little bit about Julia. So the Doctor. One of the first thing that happens is the Doctor arranges to have the bloody mattress that Julia died on, and this is the first weird thing of this movie is suddenly this mattress, which we paid no attention to in the last film, suddenly takes on this sort of talismanic importance. He grabs it because he knows that it will be a way to kind of make a connection with the Cenobites and the world of the Cenobites. And so he has it taken to his lovely little suburban home, and he has to add blood to it, fresh blood, which then brings out Julia. I should mention, by the way, he does that in a really grotesque, hard to watch thing where he gets a guy who's suffering from paranoid delusions to cut himself repeatedly with a razor, and so he bleeds all over this mattress, and that means that the Julia, the awful, treacherous wife from the first film, crawls out of hell in her skinless form, just like Frank. And they don't have the original actress playing skinless Julia because you need an actress who has no fat on her, because she's in turn going to be encased in a latex suit, which is supposed to make her look like she's skin and bones. So they've got a different actress playing skinless Julia.
The strange thing about this is the guy that believes he's cutting bugs off of him is the guy that played Skinless Frank in the first movie. So,
and he shows up briefly as Skinless Frank here, too. Very briefly.
Oddly enough, this is kind of Julia getting revenge on Frank twice over.
Also,
yes.
I was saying, it's also the scene, actually, him getting the mattress also answers the question from the first movie, was that their house burning down in the last scene? And the answer is no, it couldn't have been, because you wouldn't be able to save the mattress from a burning house.
Right.
And
no, that's true.
they actually end up going into the house too, so I mean that also answers it, but just saying. And how do the police just are like, okay, Doc, we'll send you over this bloody mattress?
That is super
he has
strange.
money. I mean, like anything else, he has money and he's connected. A dude like that probably he's a doctor, he's a psychologist as well. He probably has dirt on tons of people, and he's a twisted weirdo. So, he's a horrible person. So he's willing to bribe people. He's willing to, I don't know. At that, I didn't really think about that because, terrible people get their way all the time.
Well, yeah, exactly, because they can say all kinds of things. Because the cop might go, "What do you need with a mattress?" And he'd just go, "Back off, man. I'm a doctor," and that'd be it. I don't
I'm a
know.
doctor.
It's
Don't
part of.
question me.
It's going to be some kind of contact therapy. I wanted to see the mattress to do some kind of breakthrough. Doesn't matter. Going to get the mattress to my house, and so they do that. By the way, this mattress ate somebody at the beginning. You're exactly right. When they send somebody over to grab it, it literally eats a worker or half of a worker. And
Well, that happens at the
At the
beginning.
end.
At the end.
Yeah.
oh, that was the end. Oh, I'm so sorry. I've looped the movie in my head, and I was thinking. I apologize. Okay, all right. So forget I said that. That's at the end. So anyway, Julia, Skinless Julia, played by Deborah Joel, who's really funny and really clever, and does great things with her face. She's a sort of wonderful puppeteer of her own body, and her mouth and everything. She, because she comes out and she is this bloody, gelatinous, skinless mess. And so she's impressed by the doctor that he would be smart enough to have revived her. And so they begin really quickly, because this movie moves like lightning. They become a sort of demonic super couple. And the first thing that he does is he wraps her in gauze so that she becomes kind of the version of Skinless Julia that we see for a while through this film, which I would like an action figure of, because she looks like a mummy with just like, little red lips and
Well, that
she's
was
great.
intended to be kind of an homage to The Bride of Frankenstein.
It works, boy. That's
Absolutely.
amazing. It's great. It's really great. And she's funny. She does a lot of the same business with the cigarettes and stuff that Oliver Smith playing Skinless Frank did in the first movie. Yeah.
My favorite thing is actually the exchange, though, when she comes out in the white suit, which of course is covered in blood stains, because
Yes.
she's basically the visible woman.
Yeah, she's
And
oozing.
yeah, and he says, how do I look? And he says, you look, and then stops, and she says, strange, surreal, nightmarish. And like answering his questions, because she knows all those things are probably going through her head. The second part I think I love the most within her manipulation of him is the part where she's kind of trying, after he gets her bandaged up.
Yes.
And this is why I think this movie, one of the reasons why I think this movie does have a lot of weird psychosexual stuff in it too.
Yes.
As she's kind of seducing him and running his finger across her lip, and he puts his hand in between her thighs.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, oh my God, she is a boss, because at this point in the first movie, Frank is complaining about how he's in pain
Yeah,
because
that's
his
true.
nerves are coming back. Whereas like Julia is manipulating this guy like she was born to be the queen of hell. Like this is why they were thinking that this was going to be the breakout character of this series, I guess.
I wish it had gone that way. I love her. It totally makes sense, by the way. Women have a much higher pain threshold than men, but I loved all that stuff. Yes, all the psychosexual stuff gets focused on this one character in this film, and it's awesome. She is a piece of work. She calls herself the Queen. I can dig it. She is in a way a sort of super Cenobite. She's kind of like she doesn't do the same job that the other Cenobites do, but she is she's a part of the world of Leviathan, and I can completely she plays a role.
Well, you can kind of see them where they're setting it up with some of her dialogue, because she talks about Leviathan sending her out, bringing her back, and how it wants souls. And so she's more presentable than Pinhead and the gang.
Yes.
So he can send her out amongst the normal humans, and she can bring people back for them to torture.
Yeah. Well, especially considering that, unlike Frank, who needed blood to get stronger, but still needed to borrow a whole skin. In the first movie, she can regenerate her skin if she basically sucks on a whole bunch of people. She does this whole life force vampire thing where she sticks her fingers into the brainstem of her victim and then starts sort of sucking their life force through their mouth.
Well, Frank
Um,
does that too.
Frank, yeah, Frank. That's
Yeah.
pretty much Frank's MO.
I think
Yeah.
it's because she already knows the rules, and that Dr. Chenard has an entire hospital of prepackaged victims for
True.
her.
And
I
so
was
you wind up.
wondering
Yeah, go ahead.
about the, if you notice, like Frank, she always killed men for Frank, and
Yeah.
then she gets all these women. Like, I was just kind of curious. I was like, oh, what would happen? I mean, she does end up eating the doctor, or what's the resident? I can't remember his name. That Kyle, yeah, Kyle the resident.
Yep.
She eats him, and then she suddenly gets back. Like, or she gets her back skin, her back
Yes.
closes up, and I couldn't help but wondering. I was like, I wonder if like now Julia has a really hairy back.
That's a funny idea. The idea, yeah, no, and she doesn't even have to put on skins, which is, although this skin does, even though she's regenerated the skin, it slips off later.
Yeah,
which
like
is
all the time. It's like a size too big.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, and then we get the original actress back, who is a delight. I mean, she's really neat. That actress is called Claire Higgins, and she's really fun. How many did she do anymore? Please forgive my ignorance, but
she did not want to be so the reason why that Julia did not become the star of this franchise is two reasons. One, they basically launched into making Hellraiser 2 the moment Hellraiser came out, because it was such a runaway hit.
Yeah.
So the producers did not realize how popular Pinhead had become in such a short amount of time. So this is really a good example in some ways of how fans kind of dictate what becomes iconic and what doesn't.
Yeah.
The other reason is that Claire Higgins doesn't particularly like horror movies. She likes working with Clive Barker, but she doesn't particularly like horror movies, and she's never actually even seen either of these movies in their entirety.
No way.
No, she's very squeamish, and she didn't want to keep coming back and doing more of these.
Yeah.
And so there was that rationale. I'm sure they probably, if they kept putting zeros in front of, I'm sure eventually they could have worked something out. But between 1987 and 1988, Pinhead had become an overnight pop culture icon. So, the producers, we're like, well, I guess this is where we're going with future installments.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Did you realize that Claire Higgins was not only in Ready Player One, but Doctor Who?
What did she do in Ready Player One? I didn't know this. No.
But she looks very different now.
No doubt.
In Ready Player One, she plays Mrs. Gilmore. Don't ask me who that is.
Okay.
But in Doctor Who, she was on the show from 2013 to 2015 as Ohila or Ohila.
I don't know. The funny thing is, my daughter, so and Julia, our regular cast member Julia, would know because she watches Doctor Who all the time. So that's interesting.
Well, I mean, Jamie and I both watch Doctor Who, and I'm afraid I cannot place her as a Doctor Who character.
Yeah, I don't.
Anyway, I like also that how old is she here in this film? So she was born in 55. So that makes her, what, 32 or so. She's neat. I like her maturity. I like the sort of elegance and sophistication of this actress and the way that she plays the character of Julia. She's cool.
She does get a lot of really good lines. Like, I always think of, I'm no longer just the wicked stepmother. Now I'm the evil queen.
Oh God, isn't that great?
Yeah.
That sounds like a Clive Barker obsession line. That's really neat, because that's so like actually, it sounds frankly more like Neil Gaiman. Honestly, that kind of obsession with myths and playing around with them and yada. I love that. I love the Queen. Again, I would
she
really
was the
like an
high
action
priest.
figure.
She
Go
was
ahead.
High Priestess of the Sisterhood of Karn in the Hellbent episode of Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Now I can place her. She's when the TV movie Doctor regenerates into the War Doctor.
Yeah.
No way. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Paul McGann becomes John Hurt.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So that would be 8 becomes War Doctor. All right. Sisterhood of Karn. Cool. Got it. All
No,
right.
the Sisterhood of Karn from the Brotherhood of the Gash to the Sisterhood of Karn.
The thing that here's what's weird. Oh wait, it sounds like we're losing you, Jamie. Try say something again.
Something again.
Okay, now you sound fine. I don't know what happened. Okay, I know that we need to talk. We need to talk about the 2 girls who are ostensibly our heroes, but here's my main problem. I find them completely uninteresting. We have Kirsty and we have Tiffany, who is this girl who works puzzles all the time, and
You don't find that interesting.
I
I
don't.
liked Tiffany.
Okay,
I thought she was the best part of the movie.
then
Like, I
you
thought
go
she was
crazy
the
talking
best
about
actress.
Tiffany. I'm tired of the trope of the all important and probably slightly autistic character who everybody's it's
She's not autistic.
I don't
She's
think it was
traumatized.
quite a trope
yes.
at that point, though, was it? And can you think of a ton? I mean, there's some movies, I guess, where there's some child who seems to have some sort of, I guess I don't want to say handicap, but like some sort of ability, like that's not normal, or or I don't know.
Well, she
how to say
definitely
it.
has this amazing skill. Truly, yes.
Right. But she doesn't speak. She doesn't speak. That's the
until
big
later.
thing. And the
Yeah.
doctor acts like he doesn't even know who she is, how she got there, or what happened to her. But
Yeah.
then, throughout the movie, that was the one thing I actually really did want to know, because they kept flashing to her mother and her asking the doctor, "Doctor, can you help my daughter?" And then it would be like, "Doctor, my daughter's obsessed with puzzles. Can you help her?" And and it was just suddenly he just murders the mom. And you see her scream, but it's it takes the entire movie for her to really put this together. And that was the one thing I thought was actually excellent in the way that trauma does manifest in people, where you do block something out to a point where you forget it and you don't remember all the details, and then it just keeps coming because you've worked hard to protect yourself in that way. And I thought that was actually kind of interesting, even the way I feel like her visual cues of eye movement and whatnot. I thought she was actually really good for a young teen actress.
Okay.
So,
well, I mean, no, I think that's a vociferous defense.
Jason,
It sounds
you
pretty good.
You called her autistic. Her thing of working through puzzles, to me, that's not autism. That's a coping mechanism. That's a type of mania.
No, you're right. I was wrong. It is a mania.
Well,
You're
I
right,
can
and she's
understand
traumatized. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand why you would say autistic, though. I mean, she's not speaking, and she is going Rain Man on the puzzles. So, that's
No, I understand. It's a good point, and I shouldn't have said that. That's insensitive to people who have autism. The I'm very interested in Julia. I'm very interested in the doctor. Our 2 heroes are so color. That's it. You're right. I think you're bringing out some of the color in that character.
Well,
because to
I
me,
also think the way Kirsty is dealt with in this movie, so seldomly do we see characters in horror films actually put where they would probably end up having survived a horror film. And I'm not even saying that to be glib. I'm saying that this is one, it's probably what would happen if you started telling a story about a puzzle box that's a gateway to hell. And secondly, this movie, through Kirsty, the way the first movie deals with some of our fears about family, this movie really does deal in, some of our fears about in our apprehension about the medical profession and about psychiatrists.
That's a very good point.
Grief and losing family like that. So, I mean, both Kirsty and Tiffany are all alone.
Yeah.
And they kind of form a makeshift family between the two of them. Like you have the relationship with Kirsty and Kyle, but that's kind of
well, just short-lived and inappropriate.
Yeah, absolutely inappropriate.
That's true. But it's one of those things that it does actually that it is realistic that Kirsty is so traumatized and sort of slow moving and all that stuff. That makes total sense.
Well, it's how Frank tries to manipulate her back to him.
I mean, I've often, I've had conversations with editors and so forth. They're like, well, what if such and such character dies? And I was like, unless we're just going to pay no attention to realism, if you kill a character that close to the main character, it's going to feel weird that they're totally engaged in the rest of the story, because I know I wouldn't be. It's so it does make total sense. The fact that this thing picks up right away means that Kirsty is, until the end, when she really starts being a badass, she's kind of a basket case through a lot of this.
But that's the thing. Like, one of my biggest criticisms of a lot of modern films is nothing. And I just saw this in Solo. Like when I watched the new Star Wars movie relatively recently. No one ever stops to deal with grief because movies aren't interested in that. They want to keep moving along, and they want characters to continue to be glib and light and badass or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it really bugs me that that's never dealt with. So one of the things I do enjoy within this movie is that it does take, time to actually have characters process that.
I guess that's true. No, I agree about that. And
one
the tough
of the
thing
I actually found, well, it's a little bit not really on the same wavelength, but kind of.
Go crazy.
With Tiffany was when, towards the end when she's like hanging off the side of the whatever cliff, like wall of the labyrinth or whatnot, and it was the one time. Oh, never mind. I just remembered that. Never mind. I just corrected
I was
myself.
going
I was
with
gonna
you.
say the one time when I feel like Julia was, could have redeemed herself. Like she helped Tiffany come up off the wall, and then I remembered that it's just Kirsty in a Julia skin suit. I was
That's
like, oh
right.
wait, never mind.
She finds the skin, presumably finds it, and puts it on. I really love the physical
I mean, it's
space.
just convenient that it's the same size. I mean, actually, I would say
Yes.
not only is it convenient, it must, because Julia's skin was sagging off of her a lot. It's probably a good thing because maybe that's why, because she was changing it on and off or whatnot.
Yeah.
It gets stretched out.
It's such a
Everybody's
crazy
trying it on.
concept. I mean, it's such a nutty concept. This that they can wear skins. I love it. That's I
I'm borrowing a T-shirt.
it's neat, and that I also want to say that's something that they can do in the hell space. Basically, once you've opened the puzzle boxes, opened the trip to hell, the people who are part of the story can just walk into this other realm, and the realm that is the realm of the Leviathan. And I love the way this space works. It's an actual hell. There are different people have their own sort of caverns where hell is being worked upon them. You can run over it, across it. There's a giant matte painting that just looks awesome that I love, showing the whole. I think Drew called it Escher-like. This, it looks to me like the cover of a horror book from the 1970s. Or that, because I've seen designs like this before, and it's super neat. Yeah, I mean that is really cool. And in fact, we see Frank's personal hell. She finally catches up. The plot of why did Kirsty go into hell? The answer is Frank tricked her into thinking that her dad was trapped in hell. And
So
so yeah, go ahead.
one thing that I am regretful about because they couldn't get the actor that played Larry
Yeah.
back, and I am now that I know more about the previous drafts of the screenplay. Originally, when they visit Larry or when they visit Frank's hell, he was going to have Larry bound, like they were going to be bound together as this weird like Siamese twin thing, and they couldn't get the actor back for whatever reason, and so we get this, and this is still interesting. And I never felt any regret about the scene until I knew what some of the stuff that they had planned for it, which was a little bit more elaborate. But I think that's an interesting bit of trivia, so to
Yeah.
speak.
And he didn't want to do it.
Well, he just felt like there wasn't much for him to do other than be pulled around by Frank, which
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean it's fair, and you don't really need it because this is already so many characters' stories. It's Kirsty's story, it's the doctor's story, and Kirsty's story basically ultimately comes around to her becoming a hero to Tiffany and saving her by doing the clever, I mean, almost folkloric, Red Riding Hood kind of thing of putting on a skin that's not yours
Well, but
to
before
fake
you
your
talk
way.
about that, I really do want to talk about what Frank's personal hell is like.
Yeah, we should, because I got nothing else to say about putting on Julia's skin. Yeah. Tell me about Frank's personal hell, please.
You talked about how there isn't as much sex stuff in this, but like the sheer, first of all, design. You have, they walk into this room and you have these like stone slabs that come in and out with writhing nude female figures that are moaning sexually with
Yeah.
sheets over them.
Yeah.
And you have Frank saying, they tempt him, but they basically he's being teased. The hedonist is being teased for eternity with sex that he can never actually have, and so he's calling his niece into hell because he wants to finish the attempted rape on her
God.
from the first movie.
Yeah.
Like this is it's a fucked up scene, first of all.
Yeah.
But it's like there's a lot of stuff going on here, and the fact that it's just one block, like tiny block of the movie, to me is, and maybe that's why people are saying it's disjointed, because you're kind of, but like even the idea that Frank as a as a hedonist and a rapist has this personalized hell is very interesting, because you're getting into the idea that hell would have to be singular for the individual.
Sure.
It wouldn't
It's
be
pretty
the same
cool.
for every
Yeah.
person. And we saw this reflected a few years later in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, of all things, but definitely more artistically done here.
That's I have no memory of the Bogus Journey, but
It's funny that you mentioned that. I was like thinking of other movies that the scene reminded me of, with like the writhing bodies into the sheet. It totally reminds me of Dracula, Dead and Loving It. Like Leslie Nielsen. There's like a scene that's like, I mean, it might as well be lifted from that.
Interesting.
I think that came out after this, though.
Sure, yeah. Certainly, yeah. No, it may well have. That is fascinating, because it means that these people, and also Frank hasn't gotten to be a Cenobite. So right now he's going through punishment, and that's fascinating. Whereas the Doctor skipped right past his hellish punishment. Now, we don't know how time works in the world of Leviathan, so we don't know if when he went down the elevator being turned into a Cenobite and the time that he comes back out, it might have been 20 minutes, but who knows? Maybe he spent an eternity being punished. We have no idea. But he comes back out and he has become it's really cool. He has a giant tentacle that is sucking on the top of his head and sort of carries him around like he's an extension. Like you've gone to hell and you've been turned into sort of a finger puppet for the devil.
Well, the original conception of Leviathan was going to be sort of a big Lovecraftian monster, but they replaced it with this geometric shape later on. That's of course evocative of the box. But the tentacle that Dr. Channard has is, probably a holdover from the tentacle monster version
I
of
love it.
Leviathan.
I have
Audrey
to say,
too?
yes.
They do. They look like the Little Shop of Horrors. Like I
Well,
couldn't
yes.
help singing it. Even
He's
with,
got the-
even when they have the little switchblades, I just was like,
There is some fantastic practical effects work, though.
Yes.
The stop motion parts where they show tentacles, how he launches them, all of those bits are really done well.
Yeah, he's a good
that
creature.
stuff is hit the way he gets turned into the Cenobite. Because they do, you see a lot more of that. So you see how Pinhead gets turned into a Cenobite. You see how the Doctor gets turned in. That's all.
yeah, that
like,
guitar wire or
really
string
cool
or
stuff.
whatever they do. Oh, that freaked me out.
It's amazing.
It's
The
highly effective.
The Doctor's keeps making kind of medical puns when he's going after
Yeah.
people. Did anybody else feel like maybe that might have been a concession on the filmmakers' parts? Because we talked about this last week, where like we knew that the producers wanted Pinhead to be a little more jokey like Freddy Krueger, and I feel like the Doctor and the Doctor Cenobite is kind of that character. He is more campy, and he is more, his jokes are a little bit more on the nose as opposed to the more sardonic jokes that the other Cenobites tell.
Super good point. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I completely. Yeah, I guess so. His jokes are dumb. The thing is, he's so fascinating. He's such a fun character that I'm kind of okay with a lot of these jokes. And also, since they're all along the theme of being a doctor, like I'm taking over this operation, it didn't bother me it wasn't as bad as Mr. Freeze, I suppose. But is it on the level of Freddy? I don't know. I don't know. Yes, I think the answer to your question is yes. That's exactly what they're doing. I'm okay with it though because it worked for me. But yeah, he's definitely not as slick as Pinhead. That's for sure. He doesn't have that droll irony that Pinhead had, and apparently we'll have again. But yeah, he's carried around he doesn't have to walk because he's carried around by a giant tentacle that goes nowhere. I love it.
Let's just call it what it is. It's a giant dick.
It's amazing.
When we say tentacle, it's a big diseased penis.
Blah, blah. Yeah. So that's happening, and rather than belabor any of the plot points, how do they remind me of something, because here's what I've forgotten. How do they defeat the Doctor? I can't remember.
That's the part. There's all this stuff that's like the last third of the movie or last quarter of the movie is baffling because they've set up all this cool stuff going on, and you get Kirsty runs and then drops the box, but it's changed into like this Leviathan looking thing. Julia gets sucked away by this wind that just happens, leaves her skin behind.
Leaves the skin. Yep.
And then the Doctor is making all these puns and shooting tentacles, and somehow because Tiffany has solved
Tiffany solves the puzzle, and
somehow that makes his tentacles stick into the ground, even though he has some other tentacles he could be using to shoot people, and he gets pulled apart by himself, which I guess is maybe part of the thing that Drew was talking about, well, maybe that's part of originally supposed to be part of Leviathan, but it doesn't. It looks cool on screen, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. Where he's like, I'm trying to pull my tentacles out. Oh no, I've pulled myself into pieces.
I mean, the funny thing is I went with it and then I immediately forgot it all. She solves the puzzle, it kills the monster, I'm fine.
In the first draft script, there was supposed to be a bigger fight between Channard and the original Cenobites, and
I hope so, because that part sucks.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if that's why this movie just sort of ends, because when they lost some of their budget, they had to cut that. And I think that would have been a more satisfying end to the Channard Cenobite, because yeah, it just sort of happened. My read on it is, now that I know that, to think of that as part of Leviathan is maybe Leviathan's like, oh, well, you failed me, so I'm discarding you. I thought you were my new favorite toy, but fuck it.
Well, and since it's all Leviathan's toy box, the reality is he could turn you into macaroni, and then next week he could drag you back out again and go, hey, go kill some presidents. I mean, Leviathan, I get the impression, can make and unmake Cenobites on a moment's notice, and
well, if you go off the sequels, he totally can.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yes, and did we leave? I remember, Pinhead shared a pensive look with Kirsty once he had been turned back into, she had revealed his humanness, and they all got killed. But we know that they'll be back later as Cenobites again. And Kirsty and Tiffany managed to make it out of the hospital, having survived. And I don't remember what happens to them at the very end. I mean, I think they're okay. We're left
they're
with
just
them
kind of walking off through a garden labyrinth.
And there's
flowers, everybody.
Yeah. And they're they're a family, right? They're a new adopted family because they've been through all of this stuff.
They've literally been through hell.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and so right, that was that point at the very end where the workers are emptying out, Dr. Channard's place, and the mattress actually eats one of them, which I found hilarious and silly, but still
And
hilarious.
then you have the giant rotating
the
pillar of pain with Julia and Pinhead's screaming heads in it. Now, originally, it was going to be that Julia comes up out of the mattress again and has the black Leviathan lights coming out of her eyes and nose, setting up for a Hellraiser 3 starring Julia. But when she made it known that she didn't want to be in any further Hellraiser movies, they switched it to this, and this is the through line they went with Hellraiser 3. Although the pillar looks cooler in Hellraiser 3 than this one.
As much as I dislike Hellraiser 3, I have to admit, because this looks, man, like you have a budget and you do things and you're trying real hard, and I get it, but a lot of that does not look good close up this time around.
No, especially when you see it high def.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it was not meant for this level for a high def experience. It's a shame because they do such amazing practical model work and stop motion and stuff throughout the movie that the pillar, even the matting on the pillar when it's coming out of the mattress, oh man, I don't know. And again, you do what you have to do. Like, it's not really meant to be a knock, but when you have such cool stuff, the things that are lesser than that really stand out. And
what you said is interesting. That we have these high def televisions and stuff, but like if you and I were watching this in the early 90s on VHS, it would everything's softer, so all of those hard edges get smoothed off. Your brain has to fill in a lot because everything's sort of darker and muddier and everything, and somehow some of these movies actually benefit from a little bit of that.
On the flip side, for example, the Julia suit, the muscle,
Mm.
Slim Goodbody,
Yes.
Visible Woman version of this is extremely detailed
Yeah.
and just insane. That it's definitely, it feels like, I mean, I haven't seen anybody up close, luckily, but a flayed cadaver, if you've seen any kind of pictures, it feels like that. And man, seeing
It's
that
so good.
emotion and that it's super effective, really evocative, again, which makes the pillar part just disappointing in some ways. It's a shame they had to go that way, because a Leviathan Julia would have been pretty cool.
So
But yeah,
I
it just wraps up so
well, there's
quickly
no
and
abruptness. Yeah.
oddly.
Well, it's a gag, really, in a sense, because it's just a gag. It's something to give us a stinger after the heroes run out. That's all it is. It makes otherwise, and that's very common for films like this. Just like the gag at the end
Right.
of Nightmare on Elm Street, right? Which makes no sense at all. It's just there for fun.
Plus, as soon as, I mean, they bring back the guy from the first one, sort of,
Yes,
kind of.
I love him. Yeah, the vagrant. Yes,
What is your pleasure, sir?
Well, he's, at this point, you recognize him as the vagrant, and then you also welcome him, recognize him as the guy who's selling the box to Frank.
right,
So
right.
So he's become
I
the combo of those two.
Yeah.
I would like to know about, like, this is another bit of mythology, and I don't know, because I always stop with Hellraiser Bloodline, although I may finally go down the rabbit hole of the direct-to-DVD sequels.
Hmm.
I want to know about this, like, apparent group of human followers who try, human seeming, at least, because if you go off the first movie, the vagrant's actually a big bone demon. But these guys who are on Earth who are peddling the box to
Uh-huh.
people. I would like a story about that, because there's so much about the Cenobites, and admittedly the Cenobites are cool, so I get that, but like this, the idea that there's this almost like cult or conspiracy on Earth that exists to get this box in the hands of hedonists is kind of fascinating to me.
Well, I mean, since the pillar is demonic / Cenobite, I get the impression that the person selling it is also just a manifestation from hell,
Well, I mean,
who's
that's
allowed to
basically
sell,
made
like,
implicit
but I don't think
with
he's
what.
human. I don't think he's ever, I mean, at one point in time he's probably, he had to be human to get his soul there, but I don't think he's supposed to not be, it's the same way when you meet the devil at the crossroads. He's not necessarily always has horns and stuff. He may look like a dude in a suit.
Yeah, this guy's an agent
Yeah.
of hell. He's that he
Yeah.
clearly,
But
it's his.
where is he in the bureaucracy, like the Jamie was talking about? Like, is he higher up than Pinhead? I mean, admittedly, like, if you go off like the sort of, because like there's this whole Hellraiser expanded universe, some of which Barker wrote himself and some of which other people. So but like, the
No,
movies that.
I don't think he's higher at all. I think he's he's just a different branch. It's like if it's World War II and you've
He's
got
on the sales force
right.
instead of in
Exactly. You
production.
have people fighting the war, but you also got Ronald Reagan making publicity movies in Hollywood, and he has a rank just like everybody else does, and he's part of the effort, and it's just yeah. This guy's on this. You said it exactly right. He's in PR in a sense. He's on the sales force, and yeah, you could draw a diagram, but it would be missing huge chunks because there's so much we don't know about how Leviathan's minions work. It sounds like a fun party. I gotta say, like when they get together at like Samhain and like kick back with some grog, chat. I yeah, like who else did we see? And also like we said, time might not. Is my
I think
computer
that's
feedback
you.
like that? Huh. All right, let me make it.
That sound.
I think it's Jason.
It might be my computer feeding back somehow.
He's dropping the bass. He's making dubstep.
Yes. All right. Well, I think that's about all that we have to talk about with this film. Why don't we go ahead and get our final thoughts? And if we get a chance to come back for I mean, should we, we're going to do some Nemo stuff for a few weeks, but do you think that we should return and do like more Hellraiser? We should probably talk amongst ourselves and also hear from the listeners.
I know Tony does not like Hellraiser 3, but I would totally love to do Hellraiser 3 and Hellraiser 4 at one point, at least.
In other words, all the theatricals. That's
Yes.
I'm not against that idea, because I gotta say, once a movie like you reach the tipping point where the movies are like just spinning around themselves with mythology and they become less and less making any sense, I begin to sometimes kind of like them more because it's just you're not even really a movie anymore. You're more like a strange meditation on what all of this is about. And I can kind of go for that. Let's get our final thoughts on Hellbound Hellraiser 2. We'll start with Tony, like we did before. Tony, if we've missed anything, I apologize. Tell me your final thoughts on Hellbound.
I mean, I still really like how it starts to build the mythology. Putting Julia in as the queen of hell and having her serve Leviathan by bringing potential Cenobite candidates, as well as just being flat out ruthless, like when she's ripping the heart out of her former husband.
Yes.
She's burning Frank into smoldering ruins. She doesn't care. And there's fantastic practical effects, brilliant like bodysuits, like all the makeup stuff is great. I truly do hate how quickly the doctor dispatches all the Cenobites.
Yeah.
That's really bogus and just kind of neither here nor there. It is interesting when you're like, oh, that's cool that we get to see what they were before they were Cenobites, including the kind of reveal of the kid.
Yeah.
That's all of that stuff, but it happens so quickly and just it doesn't have as much impact. And like Jamie was saying, the callbacks and flashbacks are really just ham-fisted. It really does feel like, hey, we need to fill some time.
Yeah.
In case, just to get you caught up, because the thing is, it's kind of ridiculous because if people don't know enough about the movie that they need those flashbacks, they're certainly not going to get all of the Leviathan stuff
Yeah,
and
that's
all
a
of
good
the
point.
mysticism and all those bits. That's certainly going to be lost on somebody who's like, wait, there's a whole part with the box and the pinhead.
Yeah.
Like it's weird, and I'm assuming that was meddling at some point, because you have this very strange, like you said, Jim Henson, or I think it was Drew, very like hellish Jim Henson thing. And I could just see the studio going, none of this, people aren't going to get this weird mysticism and all this stuff going on. They're like, fine, we'll explain. Here's a bunch of footage we got from the first one, since we still own it. Sure.
Yeah.
And the stinger is pretty ham-fisted as well, unfortunately. Doesn't do much for the movie. I think there's a lot of great bits. I wish I had liked it as much as I remember it, but I still really enjoy the movie. After rewatching, though, I think Hellraiser 1 is a much more effective standalone, and the mythology parts, I think, are what I really dug about this one.
Excellent. Jamie, where do you land?
Yeah, I agree on a lot of the points that Tony made, especially like the whole thing, thinking that just cutting the throat of Pinhead is enough to get him to die. Like, is that what you're supposed to believe? And I mean, obviously, we know that Pinhead comes back, but at the same point, Pinhead is already dead.
Yeah.
Why does cutting him make any? It just doesn't make sense to me. But that's a lot, one of many things that just didn't make sense in this movie. So, do I like it? No, not really. I feel like it has the potential. This is like, one of the. I wouldn't mind seeing a remake of this movie. I feel like it could be done with a little bit, more of a congruent like plot and storyline. But I understand why it is the way it is, but it's kind of, I don't know, a little inexcusable.
Yeah.
Like it just, but yeah, I don't know. My favorite part of the movie is still like the Audrey 2 doctors. Like I just love their little switchblades. Like when I saw them and they, a finger pops out of one, and
That's
then
funny.
like, it just I laughed. I like busted out laughing. I just thought it was the funniest thing. And that's saying something to suddenly have, and I know it's probably not meant to seem humorous, but
Oh, I
I
think it
thought it was
is.
funny.
I think it's meant to seem humorous. I think it's goofy, and surely they know when something's goofy, and you know, and so, but you can play with the horror of the goofy. I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean that's all I got to say about that.
Cool. Mr. Drew, what are your thoughts?
For my part, I still enjoy this movie quite a bit. I think it's definitely, as Tony said, it's the mythology bits of it that make me like it. This is a very unique look at the underworld, at the idea of hell, and it's one that had influence in other films, as we discussed. uh and I think that alone probably makes me like it. And I do think that the criticisms here, that everyone else has made, they're valid. I'm not saying they're not. Certainly the original Hellraiser, that's a tough movie to follow in any way, shape, or form. But this movie entertains me and it moves me, and it's a movie that I go back to a lot. Like, this is a movie that's in my regular rotation. I watch this movie probably once a year, and I always get something out of it. I think I will be very interested to hear some of the comments from our online
Yeah.
community on where they fall around this one, because I know that this in some ways is a divisive movie in the fan community as far as horror fans go. But it's, to me, as far as like the Hellraiser sequels, like this is way above any of this stuff that came after it. And and I even enjoy some of them, but like, to me, this is the best sequel, hands down.
Wonderful. Perfect. I was just thinking about what Jamie said about how cutting Pinhead's throat shouldn't kill him, and the only way it can make sense for me is that once you're in the realm of Leviathan, Leviathan's controlling everything. So what really happens is Leviathan is done being nice to Pinhead for now, and so the Doctor's on the rise, and so he's able to slice Pin. It's all symbolic. It's all just translating things that are going on in the great mind of Leviathan. That's the only way it can make any sense to me.
Well,
Yeah. Go
for
ahead.
what it's worth, for better or for worse, Jason, Hellraiser 3 is all about the outcome of this battle between Pinhead
Great.
and his human half, for better or for worse.
All right. Okay. I'm down with that. Maybe after we do the Nemo stuff, maybe we should take a step back into the world. We can ask the listeners, do you want more Hellraiser? And are there things that you'd love us to discuss here that we're just not paying enough attention to? Because if so, I will definitely jump back into it and go, you know what? We did not talk at all, or we didn't give sufficient attention to X. I'm totally interested.
By the way, we're not sponsored at all. We do
Right.
this just to get together. But if we do 3, I think can we start something? Because I want hazard pay for that movie.
How can 3 be that bad? How is that possible?
It's awful. So they make it's all, again, I get what they didn't want to do. Oh, look, it's one-liners. It has one of the most dated things you can possibly have. CD head. He shoots CDs. It's terrible. It's all the things that if you're like, hey, what's really not good about 90s horror? Ooh, let's take a beloved franchise and put all of that into there.
If I tell
Man,
you,
I remember renting that and just wishing, like, why I should have left it.
It is really dated. For my part, Jason, I think it's still pretty entertaining. It's got a scene where Pinhead goes to church. What's not to like?
Oh, geez, he's so blasphemous. The hell guy is in church. Woo,
I
demons
love
do.
I love that
Ugh.
part. I don't care what you say,
Ugh.
Tony. That part makes me happy.
If you were to ask
Everything
me,
Clive Barker's done that is actually feels blasphemous,
yeah,
and everything he stood for and why he puts what he does into his books, that's like a terrible parody of all of that. And a ha-ha jab because he's in the church. He shouldn't even be there because he's from hell. Oh, chortle.
okay,
Ugh.
wow. So this sounds like
Goodness.
something that we should discuss.
Agree to disagree.
Uh,
That's
That's fine.
I,
I mean,
I,
it's cool that you like it. I
some of my
hate that
favorite.
movie.
Some of I can tell. I was not
Oh, thank
aware
you.
of that by the way you were reacting, and I'm not
Oh,
trying to
no.
defend that it is a great landmark of filmmaking. It's not. It still entertains me.
I'm with
It's
you.
not Exorcist 2.
Well, nothing.
Like,
Oh my
Exorcist
God.
2. Exorcist 2 is let that we definitely needed hazard pay for.
I was so thrilled to watch Exorcist 2 though, because the
That
reality
makes
is I
one of us.
never ever would have watched Exorcist 2 but for the fact that we did an episode about it. And that's so I was so glad to watch it. And you were talking about the cliches of horror of the 90s. The one that shows up in the 90s horror a lot, and I'm curious if it'll show up in these Hellraiser sequels, is Dutch angled flashbacks in a blue wash. Like you're remembering something that happened, and all of a sudden the camera's like canted like 30 degrees, and everything is in this like blue shadow, and some person wrote a memo
oof.
in like 1992 and said, from now on, flashbacks, candid camera, blue, and like everybody's like, okay. So and that like went and went and went until like
So I
yeah.
have watched most of the sequels. I Bloodlines I actually remember liking. There's a further one, and I can't remember which number it is, with Kirsty in it. And I remember
Really?
going, "This isn't a great movie, but they're really trying to do things that feel very Hellraiser." I remember thinking that one was cool, giving props to that. The last two, I didn't see the last one because there was
Doug
one
Bradley's
before it
not
that
even
was
in those.
yeah, there's one before it that's like a found footage one, and
Oh no.
I got like 10 or 15 minutes into that and
Oh
was
no.
like, and then somebody was like, "Oh, well, the sequel to that one is directed by the same director," and I can't even I have too much respect for Clive Barker and myself to give that
Here's
one
a
a go.
question. Has Tony Randel, and I feel bad because, somewhere out there's somebody who's like, hey, Tony Randel's my dad, Tony Randel's my husband. But here's my question. Has Tony Randel done any of what we might call good films? I've seen a couple movies by Tony Randel, and he doesn't seem these are terrible. I mean, like The Fist of the North Star
Oh man,
has
don't even get.
exactly the same problems that this movie does, which is that there is way
Oh
more story
no.
than there needs to be, and it's all choppy and weird. And I'm like,
And
wow, yeah,
I love the Fist of the North Star franchise, the
yes,
animated franchise.
sure,
And that
absolutely.
movie, oh man,
No,
that is
it's
It seems like
which I got for cheap. I own it. I own it on Laserdisc because I got the Laserdisc for cheap. I don't even own a Laserdisc player. My friend did. I was
and
like, well,
it's
for
got a
5 or
not
10 bucks.
terrible cast. It's Radon Chong and Costas Mandalore, and
Also Malcolm McDowell,
oh
who
my
needed to pay the
god,
bills.
oh my god.
Oh man, no, that movie.
So those are the you know what else he made? He made the inserts from Return of Godzilla, Godzilla 1985. The inserts with
Funny enough,
with Perry Mason, those were
sure.
all done by Tony Randel. Although I don't remember them being that bad. I haven't watched that movie in 30 years.
No, I mean you can tell as an adult. You can tell they're kind of shoehorned
Placed
in there,
in.
but I mean, they do what they do,
Yeah.
right? Like,
I feel terrible even saying this because I'm an artist. I know I'm capable of good work and bad work. And Tony Randel's an artist who's the same. And so I feel like, I just feel terrible saying I have yet to see something from Tony Randel that I thought was good work.
well, I like this movie. And I had forgotten he had done Fist of the North Star, which I truly
It just seems
despise.
like Jason, for what it's worth, I would still say this movie was a moderate success.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
you
There's a there.
can't we're still talking about it in somewhat
Sure.
amicable
Yeah,
terms, which is more than I can say. Like, if you mention Hellraiser 2, you're not going to have an argument on your hand the way that Tony and I just had about Hellraiser 3, for
right.
example.
No, it's true. Uh, so who knows? And by the way, if we had him sitting here, he'd probably go, "Guys, what you're not understanding is what happens when you have an unfinished script and 2 weeks to make a movie, and
Oh,
this and that."
absolutely.
Well, what
There's
they had a script, Jason. What they had is a budget that got cut while they were in the middle of
sure.
making the movie.
Oh no, I was actually realizing that I was wrong about you're right because I kind of liked Hellraiser too, but I was thinking about the other stuff like Fist of the North Star
I mean,
and
he makes
whatever.
a lot of low budget horror films, and that's his career. There's worse things.
Oh
There's
yeah,
worse fates.
I'd take that career. Yeah, no, that sounds like fun.
I mean,
Okay.
that is truly terrible. Because that happened with I saw a Q&A with the director of Dylan Dog,
Hmm.
and he said he was on the plane to go film, like they were about to go on location. He was on the plane. They gave him a call. I'm like, hey, so your budget, I think it's half, or it may have been a
Grief.
quarter. It was something just a very, very large cut.
Yeah.
And he's just got to, gets there like, okay, so we bought all of this stuff. I guess we're gonna finish making this movie because I have signed on to make this movie. But
Yeah.
those are the choices you have to make whenever
Oh yeah.
you do what you do. And I think doing what you do turned out decently for this movie, all things considered.
It's really hard. So yes, and I think I gave my final thoughts. There's a lot of stuff here that I enjoyed, um, but the first one is still a wonderful standalone story that is just fabulous, and that's the story that we're going to have with almost any horror movie that becomes sequels. Is the first one usually stands alone pretty well. Let's get our endorsements. I don't know if you guys have something to endorse, but I guess we're gonna find out. Uh, Tony, watching, reading, listening to anything that you want to recommend to us?
Um, let's see. I've been enjoying Umbrella Academy.
Mm,
It's different from the book, but it's still got a great cast and some really really awesome bits. Like I've been really enjoying that. Let's see. I'm trying to think what else. Mainly, I've been working a lot, so I haven't had time to do much else. Oh, I do need to post. One of my favorite bands that has sung about a bunch of horror stuff was a band called Wrathchild America, because they found out that there was another band called Wrathchild, and so they had to change their name to Wrathchild America. They have a song called "What's Your Pleasure," and I need to post that
oh, that's cool.
on the page because it's pretty cool. Because it's basically a song about parts 1 and 2, but mainly part 2, if I remember
Oh,
correctly.
that sounds
Yeah.
fabulous. That
Yeah,
sounds really
it's
great.
it's total thrash metal. It's great, and they were great. The two Wrathchild America, they eventually became a band called Souls at Zero. But the first two Wrathchild America, they have songs like "London After Midnight" and
Sure.
a song about waking up as a zombie and crawling your way out of a coffin, and stuff like that. All the good things.
That sounds great.
But yeah, I really enjoy it. But I need to post "What's Your Pleasure." Man, I'm trying to think what else. I think that's it for me this week. I'm sure there's something else I'm forgetting, but that's how it goes.
Love it. Jamie, what about you?
Well, Drew and I actually just watched the man who killed the man who killed Hitler and then Bigfoot, or then Bigfoot with Sam Elliott, and I have to say, not to give away too many spoilers. Well, I mean, I guess the spoilers in the title. He kills Hitler and then Bigfoot, but it's actually more of a drama than you'd expect, and I think it's kind of funny. We were discussing, trauma and grief and grieving, and I feel like so much of the movie is actually about the process of grieving and getting older and losing those you love, and I feel like that's kind of the I don't know, one of the deeper sides of things you could take away from Hellraiser 2, I guess, maybe a little bit, but if you need something to cleanse your palate, The Man Who Killed Hitler and then The Bigfoot, it's I believe it's on Amazon now. It was pretty good. We enjoyed it. It's
Definitely not like somebody as you said, it's more of a drama
it's
than
more
a
of a
monster
drama,
movie.
yeah.
But it's a good drama because it stars Sam Elliott.
And
Okay.
it really is the Sam Elliott show. I mean, it's him the whole time. So
I love him. I'm so impressed with Sam Elliott. I saw him the other day in The Legacy, which is like one of his first films, and that was like one of the ones. I think it's the one where he met Catherine Ross, to whom he is still married, which
Oh,
blows
wow.
my mind. I mean, they were both
That
on
makes me like
Butch
him
Cast.
more.
No, he's been married to Catherine Ross since the 70s. And it's, they were both on Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, although they didn't actually meet. They met briefly. This is more information about Sam Elliott and Catherine Ross's relationship than you would want. But he says that, in fact, he met her, but she didn't like pay any attention to him because he wasn't like a major actor. But later they acted together in The Legacy, and then shortly thereafter they got married, and they are still married.
Aw.
Which is remarkable. Yeah, so
Yeah, I mean,
cool.
he was up for an Oscar for, I think, Best Supporting Actor for A Star Is Born.
Yeah,
And I don't think he won. But, it's good to see him getting acknowledgement. I liked him in, of course, well, first time I ever saw Sam Elliott was Roadhouse.
oh my
And
God,
we were just at
Roadhouse.
Roadhouse last week. So I was making lots of Patrick Swayze and Sam Elliott references last week, and it was like, because we were at an actual Roadhouse. Oh, so we were at Pootie's Roadhouse, out in Spicewood, and I expected cardboard cutouts or something of Patrick Swayze and Sam Elliott, but I did not receive any. There were no such things there.
People who don't like Roadhouse don't understand Roadhouse. That's all I can say about that. That is a good film masquerading as a bad film. Is the way I feel it, and I can't be argued off my position. Drew, what about you? What do you have to endorse for us?
Well, along the lines of what Jamie was saying, I checked out a documentary on Shudder this week called Horror Noir. That's with Horror Noir with an E, a history of black horror, and it's a documentary about the relationship between the African American community and the horror genre, and horror films made by African Americans and with African American characters in it. And it is a wonderful documentary, as a lot of great as Ken Foree, Keith David, Jordan Peele, Ernest Dickerson. It's got so many cool people in it, and they talk about everything from Night of the Living Dead, although Demon Knight, Blackula,
Sure.
Tales from the Hood, all these different films across the board, across many different decades. And if you're interested in our political landscape and race relations, but also interested in the horror genre, I think this is a really timely and cool thing for people to check out, and it's available on Shudder. And in response, I'm saying to do this in tandem because I did it basically across 2 nights. I watched this documentary, and inspired by this documentary, I went back and I rewatched Blackula, which is also on Shudder. And it's probably the first time it's probably the first time I've watched it in about 10 years. And that is a fascinating film. And honestly, William Marshall, one of the best Draculas by any name, in my opinion. Great voice, great sense of menace, great sense of tragedy, just interesting, vampire portrayal, all around. And the movie itself, what struck me about it, watching it in 2019, is how if it wasn't for some of the jokes made at the expense of its gay characters, that movie is like verging on being very progressive for a film made in the 70s, and not nearly as hokey as I think a lot of people would expect for a movie called Blackula to be. So my suggestion is to watch this documentary, and it doesn't have to be Blackula. I'm just saying Blackula because it is also on Shudder for free, and I know a lot of our listeners have Shudder account, but I'm saying
Sure.
watch this documentary, then rewatch one of the films that they discuss in this documentary, because I think you will watch the movie with newer eyes, fresher eyes, and I think that that's a good experience for people in 2019, thinking about where we are in the political landscape and how our fiction reflects on that. So that is my recommendation this week.
That's wonderful. That's really fantastic. I have nothing to endorse this week because I've been busy with some other stuff, and I didn't really watch anything other than Hellbound Hellraiser 2. Other than, if you haven't seen the trailer for the Twilight Zone, you should check it out. It really does seem like they're going to be doing.
Speaking of Jordan Peele,
Yeah, it does look like they're going to be giving the Twilight Zone its real due, because it looks like they're taking it very, very seriously. Oh, well, actually, I just remembered something because I was recommending this to my daughter earlier today, and I think I should recommend it to everybody. So people who love the Twilight Zone love Night Gallery less, and that's fair. But there is an episode of Night Gallery based on the famous short story Silent Snow, Secret Snow, which is about this boy who becomes overwhelmed with everything going on in his life and pressures and stuff. And he's sort of self-medicating by thinking intensely about snow falling around him and outside his window and so forth. And eventually he stops doing anything. He stops going outside. He stops responding to anything. And he's just sort of slowly filled in by this obsession with the idea of falling snow. Such a literary idea, and such a wonderful short story, and yet it becomes a perfect episode of Night Gallery, like maybe the best episode of Night Gallery. So you should definitely check out Silent Snow, Secret Snow, based on a short story by Conrad Aiken, and mention it.
So
Yeah,
I did remember some things, if you would indulge me.
yeah, please go ahead.
Battle Angel Alita, really good adaptation of the OVA, and tries to do a little bit too much perhaps, but is really close. What it does do is pretty close to the manga. I also saw, and I say this because you can, even if your local theater isn't carrying it, they're going to do Criterion Blu-ray 4K restoration of Jackie Chan's Police Story 1 and 2. And those restorations look amazing. They look great on the big screen. I imagine they look great on the small screen. Also found out Adrienne Barbeau is going to do a new horror movie podcast.
What?
Called She Kills.
Oh, cool.
Which I think about women in horror. So I think that's cool.
Fabulous.
I'm super stoked about that. And I have pre-ordered and haven't got it yet, Mallory O'Meara's book about the lady from the Black Lagoon, which is about Millicent Patrick, right?
Yes.
Who built all the suits for Creature from the Black Lagoon. I haven't received it. Friends of mine have. I'm a little envious. I have it on pre-order. The author is actually coming to Austin to host a screening of Creature and sign books, and I can't attend, and I'm really sad about that because she seems pretty cool, and also has written a book that I'm super stoked about because I really loved our Creature retrospective. So
yeah, me too.
I will probably re-endorse that, depending, I got to read it, but it comes out very, very soon. I think March 5th Yeah, so and I think Barnes and Noble and Amazon were both having sales. Lady from the Black Lagoon. I'm anxiously awaiting it because I've heard really good things, and I think there needs to be more books about important women in film. So
Awesome.
I'm pretty stoked about that.
That is great. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being, first of all, for you guys for being on to discuss the second Hellraiser movie. This has been really cool. I really enjoyed watching this and thinking about it, even if we complain about certain parts of it. This has been a very interesting, two-parter, and I think we might come back to do more. And I hope that we chat in a week. For those of you listening, leave us reviews on iTunes and really anywhere else. Come to the Facebook page, let us know what you think, and we will definitely want to engage because we want to hear all about what you have to say. There's a funny video that somebody put up earlier about detecting Satanism in your children. Sounds really fun. I can't wait to check that out. And that's it. I appreciate you guys being on. We'll see you soon.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.